First off, everybody, welcome. Welcome to reInvent, and welcome to this Compliance Summit. I'm Chad Wolf, the Director of Risk and Compliance for AWS. And today we have kind of, I mentioned a little bit before we started about this format. What we're really trying to accomplish here is to get everyone exposure to not only some thought leadership that we're kind of developing with our customers, but also you can hear directly from some of our customers on how they've handled some of these complex compliance challenges at their own companies. So hopefully, by the end of today, you can get some better ideas on how to handle these challenges in your own companies, how to deal with some of the complexities of moving to the cloud and using the cloud for regulated or audited, sensitive workloads. So that's the purpose. The format of this is going to be 3 one-hour sessions. This is healthcare life sciences. The next hour is financial services, and the hour after that is public sector. How this will go is we will have in this session, 3 flash speakers. There's they have basically about 10 minutes each from Tracelink, Merck, and Sparta Systems. They'll talk a little bit about kind of their journey in the cloud, how they, what they did, and kind of how they overcame some of their challenges. And then we're going to hear from Chris Wally on my team, and he's going to present on some things about validating systems in the cloud. So with that, and at the end of this, we have in the next room over, we have a reception. Networking kind of reception area with drinks. You can follow Chris and the 3 presenters into that room, whereby you can ask more questions and network and find out a little bit more in a conversation with them. So hopefully this will be a really good way to both hear from customers, hear from my team, and then also have a chance to network and ask your own questions. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. I'm not sure if we're going to have that, so if you have questions, please go over to the reception. All right, so we're going to start out with Tracelink, right? Peter, do you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Chad. And of course, everyone's here for life sciences. I don't know what you're doing, trying to get rid of everybody. So I'm the founder and CTO at Tracelink. What we have is the largest track and trace network in the life sciences industry. It was primarily created in order to service a set of compliance regulations. And most of those regulations have to do with dealing with counterfeit drugs mostly. We're currently processing regulated workflows for hundreds of companies, and we have customers all across the supply chain. We have dispensers, pharmaceutical companies, repackagers, contract packagers, contract manufacturers, the list goes on and on and on. And because we're part of this compliance footprint for them, we're critical to their operations. We're in their sort of main path of operations for many of their business processes. So that's what that means effectively is that running inside of AWS, we have these mission-critical systems that are not only helping them comply, but if something goes awry, they can't ship products or do other critical business operations. We started out with our own data centers. So we had 2 data centers in a very traditional model. We had a primary and then a second DR site a couple thousand miles away. And then as we looked at the nature of this problem, it became clear that what we really have here is a transactional network problem. We have a bunch of parties that need to interact with each other and or need to interact with other governments, and they're going to send all kinds of information to each other. A big catalyst here for a lot of these regulations has to deal with item-level serialization, which is where a pharmaceutical company is required to put an individual serial number on every single unit and then share information about those units with government agencies and or trading partners. So if you just think about the scale of the problem we're talking about, right? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of entities sharing what is likely going to be billions and billions of serial numbers on an annual basis, and then a multitude of events on those. And then all of the transactions that affect those serial numbers have to be maintained and dealt with. So it's the kind of thing that if you have to get a budget for a data center, you probably don't want to do that. And so AWS seemed like a good choice for us. So we've been in there since '09. We were designed from the ground up to be a cloud architected system. So we learned a very painful decision early on, which was where we tried to forklift some other software into the cloud, and especially in the '09, 2010 timeframe, AWS didn't have anywhere near the amount of capabilities and features it has today. So that was problematic. So we recast it, and in recasting it, we're now processing over about 195,000 different network entities and growing, millions of transactions that result in, millions of messages that result in billions of transactions and billions of data records. We also won the AWS Startup Challenge in 2013 for business apps. So the business has been taking off, and I think a lot of that has to do with the ability to really present what is a network solution. So what is this network and why is it important? Well, if you think about what we're trying to do here, we have a set of regulations that a number of companies have to comply with, and in complying with it, have to interact with each other and/or governments. And so if you start from the outside-in model, which is the usual enterprise model, a company will worry about their stuff and then sort of figure out how to get all the interfaces to all the other interested parties. That is usually an exercise in frustration simply because everyone has different systems, different formats, all of these different things that they want. And so what you usually end up happening is you have a few connections with a few important parties, however you deem them to be important, and those connections are the ones that you invest in, and then the vast majority of other parties you have no connection with. So it's email, fax, phone, all other sorts of things. When you're dealing with compliance applications, those are very unreliable modes of data transfer, and chances are you're going to miss something. So the network was really the right approach for us. Right. And so from that, now that we have sort of this fundamental layer where we have the ability to scale, to be elastic, to be active across data centers and all this, the next thing we have to do is establish the business relationships between the partners. And to do that, we need a network. So we basically have a directory rather on the network. And so what we have here is a directory literally with almost 200,000 companies in it, with all of the various information, the systems, the way they want to receive the information, the B2B endpoints, the users that exist in those companies. And on top of that, we layer the ability to create relationships between them. What this does is this gives us the promise of what we call integrate once, which is once you connect to the network, you can interact to everyone else. Two important pesky things you have to deal with when doing that. The first, and not the least of which, and especially important to the compliance requirements, are the data formats. Company A is an SAP shop, so they're sending IDOC. Company B is an Oracle shop, so they have XML. Company C is sort of small, and they're giving you CSVs. And so what you need to do is you need to harmonize all of these data formats for every participant. And so what we do as part of that is we have this mapping layer that basically converts everything to a canonical form that does the application processing. And then from there, we can convert it to the other side. So what you really have is a point-and-click integration to other people on the network for these various compliance applications, which is super important. The canonical form is also critical because what it allows us to do is harmonize the application semantics and what the applications do. And so this means that we can validate all the data for all of the regulatory fields, usage, all of these things. So now that we have all that and we have all of these relationships, we have the means by which we can deliver all of these various regulatory applications. So what have we done there? So far, we have, as I've mentioned before, we've effectively are supporting regulatory operations for hundreds of companies, basically 195,000 on the network. The hundreds of companies are our customers, they're the ones that are paying us, but the regulations require them to interact with other people who are not paying us. And we still have to get them on the network. We're of no use to our customer if we can't get the data to the other parties simply because they're not paying us. We've also got serialized operations. This serialization thing, I would keep an eye on this because it's a cornerstone of a great many of the global requirements, and it really distills down to almost an Internet of Things type application because now you have individual identity on every unit, and it can have its own life cycle. It can have its own journey through the supply chain. It can have basically its own life, if you will, and that becomes an important concept moving forward. And then lastly, we have, to support all of these things, we have to have a verification regimen whereby our customers can validate their systems with us. And so we generate the IQ automatically as part of the install. Our install is fully automated. And this not only gives us operational benefits, gives us security benefits, but it also makes sure that we can deliver an installation qualification to all of our customers automatically from deploying the system. On the OQ side, we make heavy use of automation. So what that means is over time, even though we'll have a manual testing component, we'll back that up with a heavy automation component, and then over time, the automation component starts to take up the majority of the OQ. And again, that can be made available to customers rapidly. The last one, and the thornier one, of course, is the PQ, which each individual customer does for themselves and what they believe the right thing to do. We have a few options here. One, we're starting a crowdsourcing program with this, and what that means is certain pharmaceutical companies are primarily the ones who are interested in this, are able to leverage the PQ activities of other pharmaceutical companies in doing their own PQ. And then right on the heels of that, what we're doing is we're backing up the automation. So we'll take the same automation we're running for the PQ, and then we'll morph it such that we can apply it, for the OQ, such that we can apply it to the PQ and make everything streamlined for all of our customers. So some time ago, about 6 months ago, someone asked me, is anyone running regulated workloads in AWS? And I kind of thought that was a strange question. And I think what you're going to hear today is there's a lot of folks actually running regulated and validated workloads in AWS. And I look forward to talking to any of you after the fact. This is my contact info in case anyone has any questions. So now I'll turn it over to Dan from Merck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Jadiv, and I'm from Merck. Just a little bit about Merck. We're a large pharmaceutical company committed to health and well-being around the world. I say we're large pharma, but we're also involved in biotech, vaccine development, and to a lesser degree, medical devices. Some of the big therapeutic areas we're in would be cardiovascular, oncology, diabetes. We also get involved in a lot of compassionate type of work. We're very committed to women's health, especially around preventing death related to childbirth and pregnancy. I don't know if people know, but every 2 minutes a woman dies from complications from childbirth and pregnancy. So we've committed a lot of resources and to that cause. We also just recently, in partnership with another company, New Link Genomics, we've created a vaccine to fight the Ebola virus in Africa, and right now it's in phase 3 trials, and it's looking very promising. So we also, try to help in those areas. Okay, enough about Merck. So as you can see on the upper right-hand corner, we have a fairly large footprint of AWS. We have approximately 250 applications supported by the AWS infrastructure. We have 1,000 plus EC2 instances, a lot of storage. A lot of that storage supports our big data platform. And we have 3 virtual private clouds in the 3 regions listed, US, Ireland, and Singapore. The way the Merck managed cloud is organized right now, it's organized in 4 primary accounts. So the first account is called the Lab Cloud, and that's our proof of concept cloud. That's if you want to try something out, you would use that account. We have a DMZ cloud, which is essentially a cloud for internet-facing applications that are more classical in nature. So when I say classical, meaning that they weren't built from the ground up to take advantage of the cloud and its architecture. Our third account is what we call the classic compute cloud. That is that's a non-internet facing account, but also classical type applications. And then the last is our modern compute cloud, which is for applications built to take full advantage of the AWS architecture and abilities, such as auto-scaling and so forth. Okay, so if we talk about our accomplishments, we currently have a single regulated application that is on the AWS infrastructure. It's an animal health application. It's actually an interesting story because the application itself was designed to be a client-server type of application, which was global in nature. This would go out to all our different animal health sites around the world. And we couldn't get it to work. The performance was so poor that we actually had to go to Amazon and put it on the cloud, and that solved our performance issues. So it kind of was a win-win for us. But that is our, our demonstration of running, a regulated workload. We also qualify all our infrastructure in general. We qualify every single instance that we put on, and then if we do have a regulated workload, we would have additional requirements around the qualification of that, which would require, say, quality, for instance. And when I say qualify, what I'm talking about is a subset of what I call our system development lifecycle, where it's understood that infrastructure is slightly different than an application, so you would do different, follow a slightly different process, but it would still be an overall process where you design and test the infrastructure. So, our entire infrastructure, including our AWS infrastructure, is qualified at Merck. I do want to say one more thing, and that, in addition to Amazon, we also have a lot of SaaS or software as a service regulated workloads. So I can think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head. We probably have a lot more. So in addition to Amazon, we do have cloud-based regulated systems. All right, so how do we do it? I think the way it started was we actually bought some of Amazon services, and our chief information security officer called one of my colleagues into the room and said, I really need to understand the security controls around Amazon and the cloud a little bit better, so I want you to go write a white paper. And essentially what came out of it was a formalized document that was basically the title of something like Cloud Implementation Requirements, and it had at least 82 requirements that for any project should be considered in terms of security controls or other type of controls to implement a cloud solution. And since then, we've obviously used that document to vet our relationship with Amazon and kind of gone through that and done our risk assessments and so forth. The other thing that we did, so essentially we came up with about 3 guidance documents to support our overall system development lifecycle processes. The second document that we came out with is what we called Cloud Security Guidance. And it's really an overall strategy. It's how our enterprise framework around our information security infrastructure is going to work. So we get into a lot of the details of pre-approved designs of how which VPC patterns are okay, which application patterns are okay, which application patterns within VPC patterns are okay, and talking about a lot of the security controls around that. So that's another document where we clearly laid out our overall strategy with Amazon from a security point of view and our infrastructure. The third guidance that we wrote to support more applications in the regulated workload would be our system development lifecycle guidance that specifically talks to how to apply our lifecycle to the Amazon cloud if we want to migrate an application there. So that's the third document. And then lastly, we updated some of our vendor management and IT supplier procedures. So when you think about the cloud is just like any other IT supplier in the sense that it's a supplier that provides not only a system, but also a service. So the assessment might be more in depth. You have to look at the security controls, but you can still use the construct that it's an IT supplier and apply the processes and assessments that you need. Especially from, say, an Annex 11 point of view and the regulatory agency's expectations, they're looking, for any IT supplier, they're looking to see if we've assessed them properly. Do we have the right SLAs in place, service level agreements, and so forth. So we've done that as well. Kind of in closing, I was asked a couple of weeks ago about sponsorship at Merck. And for the cloud. And I was kind of taken aback because I almost didn't understand the question. I feel that at Merck, our mindset has gone beyond whether we can use the cloud or whether we should use or whether we need to convince ourselves to use it. I think we're really at a position where we know how to approach it, and we need to approach it in order to stay innovative. And right now, it's really more of a matter of applying our different policies and procedures to a technology and to an IT supplier like we would to any other innovative technology or IT supplier. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Kratz. I'm the Vice President of R&D for Sparta Systems. And a little background on Sparta. We're not quite as well known as Merck, so I'll give you a little background on the company. We're an ISV, we're a software vendor in the enterprise quality management space. So our customers use our products to manage quality processes, drive transparency and compliance through their organizations, and ultimately to help deliver their products to market in a safer way. So it's all around the quality process interactions in a company. We are most prevalent in the life sciences area, in pharma and med device circles. We're very well known. But we also have many customers in other slightly less regulated industries like consumer packaged goods, food and beverage, household chemicals, those sorts of things. So anywhere where product safety could be a concern or an issue is a potential customer for Sparta. We have over 500,000 quality professionals that use our products across the world, and roughly around 700 implementations of our flagship product, TrackWise, in the market today. So one of the things that you should know about our company is we're about 20 years old, and our success has been primarily through, and this is probably even a bad word to say here at an Amazon Web Services company, but through on-premise licensed software. And considering how old the company is, that's probably not a big surprise. So you might ask, well, why are we that interested in AWS and the cloud technologies that they provide? Well, as any of our customers will tell you, delivering their products to market is more of a team sport. And they have a very complicated partner network that they rely on to develop the products, to deliver them, to do the clinical research, and so forth. So, if you apply this to the pharma industry, it's contract manufacturers, contract resource organizations, suppliers of raw materials, distributors. And the way they interact with these companies outside of EQMS, such as what Sparta provides, is completely manual. It's a lot of exchanges of spreadsheets, emails. There's a lot of paper still involved, faxes for signatures to be compliant to CFR Part 11, for example. So we saw this as a great opportunity to use the capabilities of the cloud to solve this exact problem. And that's why it's very interesting to us today. We really see the evolution of EQMS market to now go beyond the four walls of the major companies that provide products to us all. Our architecture for that solution, the name of the product is called Stratus. It was developed from the ground up to be a SaaS-based product and technology. And we leverage the capabilities of Amazon to provide this. It provides for an information bus to exchange quality information between disparate quality systems. And in order to do that, we have a patent pending on a data exchange format, which we call Quality Data Exchange, or QDX, in order to have a generic way to shuttle data from one quality system to the other. And so what we're producing here is a network of disconnected quality systems that all can communicate with each other. And the cloud and SaaS model is a perfect way to solve that. In addition to the data exchange capabilities, we also provide a very modern UI and all the analytics that you would expect for these quality professionals to actually make better decisions and have much greater visibility into their supply chain than they have today. Typically, our biggest customers, what they tell us is they know stats on their supply chain as far as quality for the top 1 to 3% of their suppliers. And even getting that is a research project. The rest of the suppliers, it's really difficult for them to understand the statistics on quality. But if something goes wrong at a small CMO, maybe it's just a 10-person company that provides labels, that can have a really negative impact on their business, and their name is the one that's on the product. So, they're ultimately responsible for the quality, no matter if it's happening inside their walls or outside. So, why AWS, and what brought us to select Amazon as a partner to provide this capability? We actually didn't start with AWS, and we've got all these great cloud capabilities, and we want to. And from my team's point of view, they want to use all these cool gadgets that the cool startup people are using, but we have rules in this industry, and we all know that. That's why we're here. And so it's not that easy to just go spinning up services and doing the things that potentially non-regulated products do. So probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when we started this project to build these services and products, we went with a traditional hosting partner. Our thought was, at the time, the cues we were getting from our customers, from regulators, from auditors, was that the idea of virtualized services just wasn't well understood by the audit community and by regulators. And so we thought it was too risky to not have a building that could be audited, to know exactly where the physical servers were. And so we went that route to get started. A lot's changed in 2 years, and actually more has changed, in my estimation, in the last 9 to 12 months. And filling this room with all of you is a good indication of that. What we're seeing now is customers that I would describe our cloud strategy to a year ago. They would say to me, that's great for your smaller customers, but we're not ready to move this type of tier 1 system and data to the cloud. Fast forward 9 months, Bruce, you're late on your cloud strategy. I really need to see what it is. So they're ready to go that route, and many of our largest customers already are running validated workloads in the cloud. The big change here is what we had seen is companies like Amazon was helping to bring together some of the major leaders in these corporations to try to figure out, how are we going to describe what we're doing to regulators? How are we going to respond to the FDA? And they've collaborated to start to figure out how we're going to describe that. Companies like Merck, with the documents that they've started to produce, are all leading us down that path, that this will be commonplace if it isn't already. So that was the big kicker for us to make the transition over to Amazon. And in doing that, we've gotten a lot of benefit out of it. We always wanted that to be the target partner, but again, we didn't make that decision initially. Now that we've moved over, cost is always a factor as you're managing a business, and we did get some cost advantages here. But for us, the biggest benefit was getting to market faster. Many of the things that we were building on our traditional infrastructure, such as mirroring of data and backup and recovery schemes, we now can use a well-defined service that's been used by a lot of our customers already, and turn that service on and get that capability automatically. And we then can recoup those resource hours to concentrate on our special sauce, what we provide in the area of quality management. So the pace of innovation that we're seeing out of Amazon, big selling point for us in moving there. What we're seeing our other customers do, also a big piece of the turning point for us. And we continue to evaluate new services every week that we can apply to our solution to make it even better. I think the last thing that I wanted to leave you with, and I was actually very happy that Peter actually touched on this already, if we want to use all the new tools that super cool kids are using out in startup land, we do have to change the way we do certain things. And I think computer system validation is one of those areas. We're also on the track of doing our OQs and IQs automatically. If you're not familiar with this, It's historically been pen to paper, checking off each individual test step, and it takes so long to do, in some companies, 6, 8 months to validate a solution, that it's not done very often. By automating that validation, we run it every single night, so when it comes time for the big test, it's a non-event. Our evidence is not check marks from an actual person, but screenshots from those automation tests. And so I feel like we're getting better quality, we're more efficient, and we're also compliant with the regulations. And if the idea of the regulation is higher quality, I would argue we're doing it better than it's been done the last 20 years. So, and we need, everyone's help in this room to help change the way the industry views procedures like that. So I'm very happy to get the opportunity to speak with you. I'm here with my colleague, Ivan Latsanishin. He's the head of product and strategy, and will be available for questions later. Thank you. You're good.
Good. All right, welcome everyone. Wow, for a compliance geek to look out and see a room like this full of people, it's a little bit overwhelming, but really exciting at the same time. Thank you all for coming. My name's Chris Wally, and I manage our healthcare and life sciences compliance programs at AWS. So that includes HIPAA. I don't know how many of you have business associate agreements, but I probably worked with you or someone on your team to get that set up. FDA, so GXP requirements, like our speakers have been speaking about today. Also international, so if anybody's from the EU or Australia, probably worked with you or someone from your team as well. So it's a global company, it's a global platform. The compliance requirements are global, so a lot of what I'll talk about today is some patterns that I've seen that cross over both international boundaries as well as healthcare and life sciences boundaries. I don't want to just focus on FDA, although that's a really exciting space for us right now. But a lot of what you'll hear today will kind of span those two areas, and I'll switch over to my slides so you guys can see. There we go. So this is mainly geared for system owners or stakeholders. And so I think, judging by what I'm seeing, many of you are probably developers. And you probably have a lot of stakeholders in your company that aren't technical. There are probably policy managers or compliance managers whose job is to make sure the rules are followed, but they're not necessarily working side by side with you to set your system up and actually develop code. So if you're a compliance manager, you'll probably hear a lot of words that are familiar here. And if you're a developer or an engineer, a lot of what you're going to hear is things you can take back to help your team kind of work within your organization better. When I get called a lot of times to talk to a customer, it's because an IT developer team or engineering team has made a cool proof of concept. They're really excited about it. The business leaders see the value. And they're ready to go to production, and all of a sudden, here comes compliance. And they're like, uh-oh, I got 5 checkboxes, and I need them all to be checked before you can go to production. And by that time, a lot of the architecture is done, a lot of the testing is done, and so having a conversation about compliance after you've already done that work is really, really hard. So these are things that you should be thinking about as you're having the very first idea that you might want to do a system in the cloud. Start talking outside of your developer team now. Work with your policy managers, executives, because there's a lot of non-technical things, right? There's in the world of compliance, I kind of see there's 2 kinds of controls. There's procedural controls, stuff that people have to do, and there's technical controls, things you build into the system for it to do. And the engineers love the technical controls. They want them to be automated, and we should automate. Manual and procedural controls have a lot of problems. But the fact is today, most organizations have controls based around procedurals, manual things that their team does. And we're in a time now where a lot of IT is moving from a manual process to an automated process. So we need to think outside of the developer community and those policy managers and compliance managers on our teams who are used to having the paper, having the checkbox, checking that box physically, and now we need to help them translate that into the cloud. So we'll talk about some of those things they care about, things I have a lot of conversations with compliance managers about. And then the real focus here too is again going to be about using the products. A lot of times when I talk to compliance managers and healthcare companies, they want to talk about AWS's controls. I want to talk about SOC. I want to talk about ISO. Tell me about what healthcare training your EC2 team has, right? that conversation really overlooks the controls that your team needs to have in place, right? You need to have the healthcare training in your developer team. You need to have the AWS product training in your compliance team. So those are the things we're going to talk about today, is actually from the user side. And then, as I said, I'm going to speak about both from my personal experience before AWS. I joined the team about 2 years ago. I came from an academic medical center doing cancer research in both kind of a mixed research and healthcare setting, a hospital. It was at the Fred Hutch UW Cancer Consortium. And then prior to there, I was in biotech, medical devices, and software as a service companies for 16 years. So I've done computer validation, I've done business analysis, I've done regulatory affairs, I've actually done regulatory submissions to FDA for drugs and medical devices. So kind of coming at this from both a user perspective and now at AWS from kind of a platform perspective. And before we get too much into the healthcare specific stuff, I just want to draw your attention, and we've already touched on some of these things, just the general, what's the difference between compliance on-prem or traditional compliance and compliance in the cloud. And the top two are definitely the biggest differentiators. In the on-prem world, you've got physical stuff. And in the AWS world, in the cloud world, it's code. And then from the delivery, the way that those systems are delivered, you probably have a lot of manual processes around your workloads today if they're on-prem, and in the cloud, you have a lot more automation. You also see things like access controls being, if you've got an on-prem network that's got devices from 5 manufacturers, all 5 of those manufacturers probably have different places where logs are kept, different features to turn on for auditing. And in AWS, you have a much more harmonized environment for auditing and logging. So I'll try and talk about these general differences through each topic that we touch on today. And here's kind of the overview of topics. And again, I think this equally applies to life sciences if you're either in the R&D stage or in the production manufacturing stage, or in a healthcare setting, even insurance companies, or if you're a hospital trying to move an EMR system to the cloud. A lot of these kinds of things, these policies that your compliance team cares about, are going to be there in some form or another. And the purchasing controls tends to be the one that a lot of companies realize after they've already done the proof of concept, that they have to go back and understand a little bit more about how it works. They probably got a PO, a purchase order-based process, right? It used to be IT had to submit a piece of paper to a purchasing department, and then purchasing created an order and submitted it to the vendor, and the vendor sent a shipment, and the receiving department got the shipment, and they had their checklist of what purchasing sent to the supplier, and they had to make sure all those things were there. And then the server got released to IT. And so that whole manual chain of things, a lot of companies have that baked into their procedures today. And their only way to know to comply with purchasing requirements is to do that manual process. But in the AWS world, you've got APIs, right? And you don't have a purchasing department submitting a piece of paper by fax or PDF to a supplier. You've got an application making API requests to EC2. And then when EC2 makes that virtual server available, they're not shipping it in a box to you for your receiving team to unpack. They're sending an API response back that says, hey, it's ready. It's got all the features that you asked for. So really thinking through from a fundamental level at the manual procedures, how you're doing things today and how those need to be translated in the cloud, that's probably the number one thing that I hear from companies. The developers who want to make the tools, the technical controls, they get it. The compliance managers, the quality assurance managers, they need your help. They need to understand how is it different, how can it work. So that's one area. The other one, organization and personnel. So in order for them to know how to do that translation, they first need to speak with you, understand how you're doing it. They probably also need training on the tools. So we're seeing a lot more companies actually bake cloud skills into things like hiring plans and job descriptions. It's becoming a prerequisite to know the cloud in healthcare. You're also seeing training and development plans. So you're already in the door, you're already hired. The company changes their hiring requirements to include cloud skills. Now you're seeing a lot more training plans that are actually including things like associate and professional level qualification on cloud products. Read and understand what is EC2 or what is S3, just basic descriptions of these products. And those things, from a developer perspective may seem like, well, I already know what EC2 is, but imagine you're a purchasing manager who's never, you know how to launch your GUI to do your purchasing, but you've never really built a system. You never coded. You really have to kind of take yourself out of your regular day-to-day point of view to get into their reality of these manual procedures in order to help them. Because ultimately, when it comes time to launch to production, they could hold you up, right? It could be purchasing requirements aren't met. It doesn't matter how cool your system is, how many logs you generate. If purchasing can't understand it, it's not going to launch. So really be thinking about the skills and types of people that you need in your organization and how to help those who need to understand to help you launch to production. We provide a bunch. If you've already used our products, you probably already know, but there's a ton of resources we provide. Written, you've got self-paced training labs online. There's a new one coming out, or that's already out, that we're really excited about. It's called Auditing AWS. Teaches you and your auditors all about what features are there that can help them translate the records they're used to seeing into the cloud world, things like CloudTrail and CloudWatch. Those are going to be tremendous resources for your auditing team, but they need to be trained on how to do that. So again, it really spans the organization. It's not just in the technical teams anymore, especially in healthcare where you've got really strong compliance teams who need to understand in order for you to be successful. They got to have the skills as well. Now, when it comes to the system, we're seeing a lot more of this, security and quality by design. You can't bolt compliance on after the fact, like we already said, right? You build the system, you think it's great, you want to go to prod, you can't do it. When they do a design review of your POC, they may find there's audit trails that you didn't get, that there's electronic signatures controls that you just happen to overlook. So, when we build our products, we think about from the customer, work backwards. We're seeing a lot more companies adopt that mentality for developing healthcare and life sciences systems. So it starts with the end user of the system, right? If you've got a laboratory technician who wants to do some genomic diagnostics of a sample, they might not know that the cloud is even behind their system, but the requirements of their application feed into your design requirements. So starting with them, even if they're not touching the cloud, is key. So that's where you get your user requirements and then define your SLA. You've kind of, again, start with your customer, work backwards from there. Then you're looking at your app, right? This is just one example, but any app will do. Look at the requirements of that app. What are the server requirements for your app? What are the data requirements? These are basic things you already know, but I think for the healthcare and life sciences community, this is day one for them. There really is just now starting to begin to be this adoption curve. So these patterns, I think, are starting to emerge, seem to align very well with a lot of the topics that the traditional compliance people care about, but we need to figure out how to translate this cloud world into that. So once you've got your requirements defined, then it's all about architecture, right? It's about meeting your SLA, architecting to the SLA of your end users. So if you've got 11 nines of availability, you can use a high availability architecture for that. We get a lot of questions from compliance managers that says, well, if my app's going to have 11 nines of availability, I need some AWS product to have that many nines of availability too. And it's misses the point of architecture, right? You can take basic building blocks with certain levels of availability, combine them together to get higher levels of availability, and that is all on the engineering teams in the organizations that are represented here. So understanding that connection between user requirements, system requirements, and architecture, being able to explain that in lay people's terms, that is the new skill for the developers in this room. And then validation. I think we heard already about validation. When I started doing validation back in 2000, it was totally protocol driven. Whip out the Word file, make a big 30-page checklist, and have an operator and a verifier. So we'd make the Word document, we'd PDF it, we'd get the PDF approved to say this is our approved protocol. Then as we executed it, we'd have one person who was the operator who would perform the action, and then we'd have a verifier who watched the operator perform the action. And each one of them would initial and date every single step of that. And then at the end of that, the quality assurance manager would look over this document with all these signatures on it, and Yes, looks very good. Oh, you missed a signature here. Didn't actually mean the system worked any better. It just meant the documentation was, correct. But now we're seeing this migration to the cloud era, right? Then when virtualization came along, you made an image. Now you make the protocol once for the first in family, and then every time you use that gold image again, you can procedurally use that without having to do the protocol. That was kind of the start. And now that it was still driven around manual, it was still someone clicking in a hypervisor to launch that instance. Now with things like autoscale, where you've got the application creating instances for you, purely a code-driven environment, fully automated, that leap of protocol to procedure is probably exponentially higher now to this automated world. And again, we have to help the compliance teams figure out how to make that leap and how to help the regulators, because it's a new world for them as well. They're going to be looking at these systems. They're not going to necessarily know how you architected it. So the more you can explain the engineering decisions you're making in lay people's terms or in non-engineering terms, the easier you're going to have, time you're going to have in achieving compliance with your company's own policies, as well as with the regulatory requirements. So you've designed it, you validated it, you know it works, now you want to launch to production. And thinking about it like a pipeline, right? This is the new SDLC. It used to be, I don't know how many people here know the V model. It's near and dear to my heart after many years in pharma. But this pipeline approach to rapid iteration, rapid development, that is truly a new thing for compliance teams and validation teams in particular. So being able to, again, describe your pipeline of delivery to production, especially when it's automated, I think there's a lot of developer activities that happen that compliance teams don't always know the nuance, like knowing that you develop on a laptop, commit to a server-based code repository, and then build your app from that. I think even details like that still aren't that well known outside of the engineering teams. So being able to explain just very basically what are the steps that are happening in your pipeline, what are the handoffs, like what are the team roles that you have? Probably have a developer, you probably have a test engineer, maybe a security engineer, validation engineer, being able to describe those handoffs very clearly with pictures and words, not just with code. That's important. It's if anything that can help your team understand what you're doing is going to help you overall. Once you get to production, things like our CloudWatch tools and CloudTrail, the monitoring, it used to be you'd have to do a periodic audit, right? There'd be a system in production, and once in a while, maybe once a quarter or once a year, someone's dinger on their Outlook calendar would pop up and say, oh, it's time to go take my paper checklist over to the production environment again. I got to check and make sure all the settings are correct. Well, that's not going to work at cloud scale. So how are you going to do it, right? You're going to have things like CloudWatch alarms where if something goes out of spec, you know it instantly. And because it's automated, you're not spending your time looking for that basic data and then analyzing it. The basic data is automated now. It's all about automation and spending your valuable time on fixing the problems that come up, not repetitive manual tasks before you even get to realize what a problem is. So I think we all know this. I just keep having these conversations, so I'm going to say it until I don't have these conversations anymore. And then again, once you have your SLA, it's all about, for your system, it's all about managing to the SLA for the system and having the evidence that you need to prove that you're meeting that SLA. If for some reason you're not able to meet that SLA and you do root cause and you trace down, there's a problem, I have something going on with my connection to AWS, or maybe there's something I need to know from AWS about how to use a product, submit a support case, right? And you should have a procedure around your end users submitting a ticket to your engineering team, and when and how that triggers a support case to AWS. That end-to-end troubleshooting, making it very seamless from your end user's perspective to getting that fixed, that is critical to compliance, especially in your GXP regulated apps or anywhere where there's a quality system requirement. Many times they ask about complaints, especially in the medical device world. Anything that goes wrong with a medical device, be it a software application or an actual physical device, that's a complaint, right? And if it's traced down to a component of your system, that's still a complaint. So your SLA and end user trouble support process is critical to showing evidence for that compliance requirement of complaint management. And then records and reports. I think the biggest change here, again, going back to the manual versus automated world, is the many records that we already talked about that used to be manually generated are now being generated automatically. You still have to keep them. You still have to keep those records. Just because they're snippets of code now doesn't mean that you don't have to keep them anymore. The challenge is to figure out, how do you keep them? What's the format? Do I leave it in S3 or do I download it on-prem? And really, these decisions will be made organization by organization. There's probably over the long-term trajectory, there'll be patterns that emerge and standards that are written about how to do this. But right now, it's still very much driven by the individual policies and procedures of each company. So working with your records retention team, if you have one, figuring out how to identify the types of records you have, the format they're in, where they're going to be kept, and how long you need to keep them. That's going to be super critical. And again, many of these records are found inside the AWS products, fully downloadable. You just have to make a choice whether you want to keep them in the cloud or move them to some other location for your team's policies. And then auditing, right? You've got the system, it's been running, you've got all the data, you know it's retained, it's somewhere, you know where it is, you know how to retrieve it, knowing when to retrieve it. When the auditor asks you, show me your design control records for your system, knowing exactly where to go. Is that a CloudFormation template? Is that an AMI? Is that a Word document that was written by a business analyst that's filed away somewhere, maybe in a online document repository? Having the full architecture of your system, the design, all the subjects that we talked about that are already producing records, having that at your fingertips is key to passing an audit. And then again, being able to explain it. Showing JSON script to an auditor the first time, if they're not used to seeing that, is going to be a surprise. It's going to take a little time for them to learn how to read that. They can do it. You just got to be patient and be able to explain, how does this snippet in this JSON script equate to some technical control I'm trying to implement for a digital signature. If you can do that, you'll be successful in the audit, both with your internal auditors as well as with external auditors and regulators. So again, this is a critical area that's different than you're used to. It'll take time. We have some classes that can help you bridge that gap, and we also have some partners that are working on training materials and documents around that as well. In summary, I think the many benefits of the cloud we've seen outside of healthcare are just now coming into healthcare over the last couple of years. I'm hoping it's on the hockey stick trajectory. But the infrastructure as code model really is fundamentally different for healthcare compliance people. They need your help understanding how to make that translation. The automation of software delivery and the shorter cycle times, it's not just waterfall anymore. I think there's still a lot of policies based on waterfall. So understanding, recognizing that when you have a policy, it may not say waterfall, but seeing the pattern of a waterfall policy will help you explain. You'll realize who you're dealing with and how much work you're going to have to do to explain to them what is DevOps, what is Agile. That's going to be a real key point for you. And then cloud skills being the new job requirements for healthcare and life sciences. We've been seeing it a lot in the healthcare space with HIPAA. More and more, we're seeing that in the life science and GXP space, and we're going to have a lot more materials coming out for you later. Some of them will be announced here at reInvent, so be listening for announcements that should make the security and compliance world a little easier for you. And then also, there's some upcoming sessions with customers that are explaining how they're doing it now. They're already running these workloads, as we've already heard here. It's up to you guys to go figure out how they're doing it and bring it to your company. And then when you're back at home, after reInvent and need some more to read, we've got some online resources, maybe ones you've already read, maybe some new ones, things you can take back to your teams and really have a discussion with them at the design phase of your solutions. All right, that's it. Thanks, everyone, and we'll be next door.